Hi, I'm Jamie. This is Dead Dodge Garage, and this is a very small revival. It's the morning after I got back from our big crazy Spokane trip. Dude, spoilers. That video's not coming till tomorrow. I unloaded the truck at Rocket last night and came home with an empty load, except for this thing. This thing is a teeny tiny outboard engine setup for a teeny tiny boat. My friend Mitchell in Spokane happened to pick this thing up for me a couple weeks ago for the princely sum of $25, because it looks cool. I wasn't sure when or if I'd ever actually see it, but since we were in Spokane, the opportunity arose, so here it is. I don't know anything about British Seagull engines. I've never heard of them before this, but apparently it's the best outboard motor for the world. I know absolutely nothing about this thing, but I can tell you from the smell emanating out of this fuel tank that it has not run in many years. I can just barely make out that it said British Seagull here, and then it said important there, and then it said something important here, but I can't read it. Seagull, don't flood except when cold. Okay. Now there are smaller engines in the world, like Nitro RC car engines come to mind, but this thing is tiny. The entirety of the engine itself is like slightly larger than my fist. Slightly. Well, the jug or cylinder of the engine is anyway. There is a separate crankcase that extends off the bottom of it here. The rod must reciprocate in this opening right here, and the crank must live there in the middle. The carburetor is just adorable. I don't know why that moves. Anyway, this is the flood control here, as mentioned, for cold starting. Oh, that's why it moves. It's loose. Aside from that fuel tank on top, which appears to hold like 1.5 gallons of fuel, the only significant piece on this thing is the exhaust. Aside from this steel support shaft, which some kind of drive shaft runs through to get to this gearbox and prop, essentially everything on here is aluminum. Aluminum prop that flops around for some reason. Because of that, it weighs, well, I wouldn't say nothing, but it's not very heavy for an engine. This unit is complete. It's got the mount bracket, it's got the tiller handle. With this mounted to the transom of a boat, you fold the tiller handle down and then you use that to rotate it in the bracket there, and that gives you steering. This clamp is broken, which is unfortunate, but I'm sure I could fix that or make a new one. Here's your throttle. Yep, that's all it is. An electric starter would be like as big as this engine. That seems unnecessary. So you just crank it over with a rope, which thankfully they tied onto the fuel tank, so it's still here. That gets hooked onto this thingy and spooled around, and then you just rip on it. This is definitely a two-stroke engine, and it will use some sort of mixed fuel, meaning there's oil mixed in with the gasoline that'll lubricate the rings on its way through. I suspect there is some kind of lower unit oil, and that's probably what that plug is for. Other than that broken clamp, the only thing holding this motor onto this mount bracket is this hose clamp. At least it's a nice American one. Oh, wow. It calls for a 10-to-1 mix. Oh no, I accidentally drained the remains of the old fuel on the ground. It's gonna evaporate, but I will be smelling that forever. I keep finding cool details, like this. C-Pack ignition by Y-Pack, exclusively for British Seagull. Nice. I always figured I'd be doing revivals on the ramp truck, but I didn't figure on one this small. Hey, there is a fuel tank drain plug. That's cool. I got it though. Stared at this for a few seconds and realized that is a vent. You gotta open that during operation and then close it for transport. It's bigger than 13/16? Or maybe it's just because it's so chunky. Rich. So do the guts of this engine do that thing that the guts of an engine need to do? Yes. Okay. How about zaps? Do we get zaps? Maybe not. Avid watchers of the channel may have seen my boat videos and know that I do, in fact, like boats. I also really like vintage marine engines. Here's one now. A gray motor Phantom 445. I got this thing with the cylinder head off. I reinstalled it using the old used gasket and some copper coat. I popped the distributor back in there, I added a ballast resistor and a 12-volt battery, cleaned the points, and fired it on ether, which was cool. The carburetor kind of needs some attention. It's in this box in pieces where it's been for like 3 years. And then there's this little guy. This is an Aero K2 canoe motor. These things are really nifty. As you can see, this one is mounted on a custom-built wooden stand. My friend Jeff built that. I actually bought both of these engines from Jeff. I've had this one running too. In fact, I had some wacky ideas for it that are probably never going to happen. But I did outfit it with a muffler and a pulley, just in case. Anyway, now I'm grabbing all the tools I'm going to need to pull the flywheel, clean the points, and generally check the ignition out in the Seagull. Also some mixed gas and some extra oil. Also, some human fuel. Don't lose that. Flywheel. Coil. Somewhere in here. Points. There are 2 points access windows. In this position, they're closed. And in this position, they are open. I'm going to check continuity between the 2 sides there, and I suspect I'm not going to find any. Oh. Well, that's unfortunate. Here's a reading through the coil from the points to ground. I don't know if this is good or not. This must be some type of magneto system. It generates its own electricity. There's nothing here to power the coil otherwise. The points seem to be working. The coil doesn't smell fried, and I do get a reading through it, so I think it's intact. I don't know. Maybe I just put fuel in it and start pulling on it and see what happens. Fuel petcock. Instead of unscrewing, it pulls out. I took the liberty of snugging up the fuel bowl connection there. And now I'm looking in the carburetor bowl, which is as easy as unthreading this cap. There, I've got it mounted up on the run stand. Looks good to me. One small issue, there is no neutral. So that is a serious hazard. Fuel on. Hopefully I put enough in there. Here, let's check. Come on now. Do the stuff. Is it doing the stuff? I can't tell. Yes, slowly. This might be half plugged. As if that would be any surprise. There you go. Ooh. Ooh. Well, it's brown. Definitely not holding my breath here. But it could happen, you know. Maybe I'm just blind and the camera didn't pick up sparks, and there actually are some. Flood. I don't know how much flooding it requires. There's no choke. I imagine it might like a little throttle. Sure. Sounds neat even when it doesn't start. Watch your shins. This gets kind of old, you know, hand wrapping the ripcord. I think we have an ignition problem. That's unfortunate. Before anyone says it, no, I'm not going to try ether. Some people. Whew. Okay, now it's flooded. Oh, that's interesting. There's like a flap right here. That looks like it's supposed to be a choke. Yeah, I bet it was. Just a little broken chunk of it. Probably would have been helpful. It ran. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So it just wasn't getting fuel into the cylinder. Let's try that again. I like it. Sounds so angry. So it runs, which is awesome. And even better than that, I have become enlightened. My neighbor Steve spent a lot of time on boats in San Francisco Bay, and he remembers these things as being loud, obnoxious, and somewhat unreliable. But also, he remembered tearing one apart and seeing coolant passages beneath the cylinder head. These are, in fact, water-cooled. I did some research, and I learned all about it. You can run them up to 30 seconds without water, so I think we're fine. But moving forward, I need a tote full of water to stick this thing in. The water level needs to sit right at that flat plane there, like right above the exhaust outlet, essentially. After it runs for a few seconds, water should start pissing out of here, and that's how you'll know coolant is circulating. I have no idea how it circulates this water. Magic, I hope. There may in fact be an impeller in there. I don't know. I'll figure that out at some point, but maybe I'll just go looking for a tub of water so I can run this thing more. Steve also informed me this thing probably makes like 5 horsepower, which just seems nuts for, this. I couldn't help myself, so I started cleaning it. Look at the shiny. I just love anything with this kind of rugged simplicity. You could pop this on a boat and be motoring around today. No problem. Assuming it cools, which I actually don't have time to test today because, well, I need to go make my wife a sandwich. But I figure, done all this work. Better start it one more time. Just for posterity. And fun, or whatever. Might even start better now. There you go. The Seagull's a runner. And with a couple more modifications, a bit of extra flotation, the ramp truck is ready to go in the lake. I know, it's not a Dodge, but it is strapped to one. Doesn't that help? I think it does. I have a genius plan for this outdrive, and it involves a tiny home-built plywood boat that I bought from a friend. It's a really bad idea. It would be pretty cool though. So, you may see that on a future video, unless no one watches this one, in which case, you won't. Yeah, I have to polish all this now. That's gonna be sweet. Anyway, if you did actually watch this video, I thank you very much for it. And remember, it's not the size of the prop, well, actually it kind of is the size of the prop now that I think about it.